What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plizont's podcast filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes, so cold that they're boiling hot. In this episode, we are going to be previewing the Ole Miss Rebels football season. Let's hop right into the stars. At quarterback, Jackson Dart, one of the Heisman front runners. This guy is going to have an insane season. Last year, I think he had about 3,500 passing yards. Look for that to be about 4,500 this year because this Ole Miss offense is stacked with talent, especially in the receiver room. Speaking of that, let's talk about star wide receiver Trey Harris. I think he is a top 5 receiver in the entire college football league, a Biletnikoff watch list guy. He is going to have at least 1,000 yards. This is probably one of my favorite teams to watch this year. And then at tight end, Caden Priestcorn, underrated tight end. Obviously, everybody last year living in the shadow of Brock Bowers, but I think he will come out and be one of the better tight ends in college football this year. On the defensive side of things, 2 massive transfers that are going to be stars on this Ole Miss defense. Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, one of the best prospects in the 2022 or 2023 recruiting class. 5-star guy, comes to Ole Miss from Texas A&M. Huge pickup. And then in the defensive back room, Trey Amos from Alabama, corner. He is going to be Ole Miss's DB1. If you're going to get locked up, it's going to be by this guy. I think he has potential to be a star, and that's why I've got him on this list. So let's go ahead and get into a couple of storylines, key losses, and additions. So first storyline I want to talk about, this is a top 5 receiving room in the entire country. You've got Trey Harris, Caden Priestcorn, Antoine Wells Jr., Jordan Watkins, and all with Jackson Dart at the helm. This team is going to light it up, especially with a play caller like Lane Kiffin. Probably going to be at least a top 5 offense, if not the best offense in all of college football. But on to the losses and additions to this team. In the losses column, we've got Quinshon Judkins, the running back last year, who just lit it up pretty much out of nowhere. There's a great video of Lane Kiffin scouting this guy. He's up in the stands all by himself. I think Quinshon Judkins was only a 3-star. Lane Kiffin took him under his wing, developed him. He had a great season last year, but he transfers out to Ohio State, and that's a massive loss in the run game. On the addition side of things, tons of transfers into this Ole Miss team. Lane Kiffin hit the portal really hard. So a couple of guys that you should pay attention to. Chris Paul Jr., he's going to be starting at middle linebacker. He comes from Arkansas. Going to be probably the on-field play caller. In the defensive back room, we've got Trey Amos. I've already talked about him from Alabama. He's going to be the DB1. This was a huge part of Lane Kiffin's plan to be competitive this year. And then speaking of competitive, Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Texas A&M. I can't say enough about this guy. He's probably either the best or second best defensive tackle in all of college football. To get him as a transfer is massive. But one of the more important things I want to talk about that's of note for this Ole Miss team that nobody else really talks about is they got a pair of guards from Washington last year who was in the college football playoff. And I think that's going to be a big part of whether or not this Ole Miss team can run the football. Julius Buelow, I believe is his name, was the right guard, and Nate Capelo, or Calipo, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He was the other guard from Washington. These guys are going to play an integral part in the run game. I don't know how much they're going to contribute to the pass protection, but either way, definitely 2 guys worthy of note to talk about for this Ole Miss team. Now let's get into our next storyline. Jackson Dart is going to have a Heisman run for sure. Ole Miss plays at some really big games. They've got one of the best receiving cores, and Jackson Dart has the talent. He's going to be a first-round draft pick probably in this next year's draft. I think he's going to be slinging it all around the field. And that brings me to my final point. This is the year that Ole Miss is going to try to compete. Lane Kiffin has been building this team up for at least 5 seasons. He got them, I think they were a 6 or 7 win team, and he has taken them to their first ever 11-win season. And this year, they're trying to get to win number 12, because win number 12 means you're probably either in the college football quarterfinals or the college football national championship game. And I think that Ole Miss has the potential to do it. So without further ado, let's get into the record prediction. At home versus Furman, first game. Easy win. FCS team, not even something to talk about. Same thing with Middle Tennessee at Wake Forest and Georgia Southern. Ole Miss gets started with really 4 easy cupcake games. They can establish their offense and get their defensive chemistry on. I think all 4 of these games are going to be blowouts, and I think that Lane Kiffin is probably going to keep the defensive starters in for a little bit longer just so that they can develop as a cohesive unit. So those first 4 games are going to be easy wins. Then they host Kentucky, and I think that's a great way to open up your SEC home schedule. I think that's a good win for Ole Miss. They're a competitive team, Kentucky. I think they have a really good front 7, but Ole Miss gets the win here. Then they travel at South Carolina. I think that that's going to be a good way to start your road schedule. That's an easy win for Ole Miss there. Jackson Dart is going to throw for 1 million. I don't think that South Carolina defense is that good at all. But then the road meets the rubber, aka the rubber meets the road, and they go at LSU in Death Valley. This is probably going to be a night game, and I think that this is going to be Ole Miss's one and only loss here. Tiger Stadium, that is just the toughest place to play in all of college football. Number 1 on the College Football 25 rankings and toughest stadium. So LSU gets the win there. Then they come back, they host Oklahoma. And while I think this game will be pretty competitive because Oklahoma's defense is stacked with talent, I have to give the edge to Ole Miss's offense. The receiving core, the quarterback, the tight end is just too much to handle. So Ole Miss gets the win there. At Arkansas, at this point in the season, I think Arkansas will be talking about firing Sam Pittman. Tons of noise around that locker room, so I give Ole Miss the win there. Then they host Georgia. Now, this is the quote-unquote hinge game for this Rebels team. If they can win this game, they will be college football playoff contenders, potentially SEC championship contenders. They got mollywopped by Georgia last year. I think it was 52-17. Really embarrassed them. Jackson Dart had an awful game, but they get them in Oxford this year, and I think that they've got the potential to win. I'm going to give them the dub here. I don't know if Georgia has got the wherewithal to go on the road multiple times in the SEC, at Alabama, at Texas, and then finally at Ole Miss. I think this is the straw that breaks the camel's back for Georgia. I give Ole Miss the win here. Now we go to at Florida. I think that Florida's got a pretty damn good team, but like Arkansas, late in the year, they've got a rough schedule. I think they'll be talking about firing Billy Napier. Tons of noise around the locker room. Ole Miss can come in and get the win. And then they have the Egg Bowl, one of the best underrated rivalries in all of college football. I think the Rebels can easily get a win here, considering that Mississippi State has one of the worst rosters, not only in the SEC, but a below average roster in all of college football. So 11-1 is my record prediction. I think that's good enough to get into the college football playoff. Maybe good enough to get into the SEC championship game. The problem is their one loss is a conference loss. So a team like Texas, who goes undefeated in conference play, or a team like Alabama would go over them. So that's all for this episode. I love talking about these Ole Miss Rebels. They are going to be one of my favorite teams to watch. Be sure to tune in next episode. We're going to be talking about South Carolina and whether or not Shane Beamer can keep his job. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe button, comment button. Thanks so much again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.